Waukesha, Wisconsin residents are honoring the 6 who were killed at the town's annual Christmas parade when an SUV tore through the crowd.
To die after an SUV plowed through a crowded parade route.
When this red SUV plowed through barricades
after a vehicle plowed into a crowd of people gathered
when an SUV plowed into a parade yesterday.
Parade after an SUV plows through the crowd.
The red SUV initially hit the first group of people.
Are you freaking kidding me?
1 week ago, when an SUV crashed into the crowded Christmas parade.
Our streets are in chaos, transforming more and more of America's once beloved towns into Gotham City.
The Louis Vuitton store was burglarized and looted. The Burberry's in Westville Mall was burglarized and looted.
And yet our media and our elected leaders on the left are working overtime to twist it maliciously away from the truth.
Looting is a term that we typically use when people of color or urban dwellers are doing something.
But we've seen all of this before. The corrupt, despicable, vile way America's most powerful elite lie to the very people who put them there. Tonight, we'll give you the facts, the truth of what happened to America over the holiday break, the people behind it all, their master plan, and how, unfortunately for them, it all proves Donald Trump was right. The media is the enemy of the people. Tonight, from Russia to Waukesha, the lying media's assault on the truth. Hello, America, and welcome to the program. Tonight, I bring you good news. This is all coming undone because people are waking up. They have overplayed their hand. You will see in the next year that people are not going to put up with this. They're not believing the lies anymore. A lot of people who voted for Joe Biden are now very, very unhappy. And when he gets on television, as he did today, and says, I'm telling you, the gas prices, you just buy an electric car and it'll go down, and it's only temporary. No, it's not. It's by design, as is everything this country is facing right now. The chaos and the crime over the Thanksgiving week was all the evidence anyone would need. Radicals are now running the show. If you've watched me for years, you know I've talked about top down, bottom up, inside out. The bottom has to rise up as the top is turning everything inside out, and the people will cry out for help. And the top will come down and make sure that everything is okay, just like they did with COVID. We didn't know what to do. We panicked. They came down and put us in our place. They are pulling all of the strings and calling the shots at every single level, and that is city, state, and federal government. Elected officials are decriminalizing criminal activity. They're making it harder to keep people that break the law behind bars. And in some cases, they're leading fundraising campaigns to get street thugs out of jail. It's almost as if they want Gotham City, except without Batman. The left has been pursuing this with reckless abandon for about a decade now. And the fruits of their labor were all on full display last week over the Thanksgiving holiday. Looters hit department stores in wave after wave after wave all over the country, from California to Illinois. Radical district attorneys have refused to prosecute cases of theft under a certain amount of money. Usually it's about $1,000. So what happens? They know exactly what is worth $1,000. They come and steal only that, and police can't make the arrest. And so the criminals run wild. And we're not talking about desperate, hungry people stealing food yet. They hit a Nordstrom's in an affluent neighborhood in Los Angeles and a Louis Vuitton store in Chicago. These criminals have been given the go-ahead by our own government. And this is only going to get worse, much worse. Case in point, the horrific tragedy that happened just last week in Waukesha. I'll come back to that later in a second. But the big question here is, why? We were talking about abortion today because the Supreme Court is hearing the case from Mississippi today on abortion. And I said that if it is overturned, it will create riots in the streets. How can I say that? Because it's a death cult. The left has become a death cult. They need, for some reason, the strange killing of babies. They need the violence on the street. Why? Why are they so intent on shredding the rule of law? Because they don't think like you, and you must stop thinking like the old American and the way we've always thought. Why would you want to turn Main Street USA into Main Street Gotham City? Well, the answer lies in another important question. If you really truly believe in Marxism, how do you get from the land of the free to the Bolshevik revolution? It's actually quite easy. You buy up as many city and state justice systems as you possibly can. Then, as you know from every dictator, when they want to make sure there's chaos, you just open up the prisons. You allow the thugs and the criminals to run rampant. Keep them on the streets. Then you separate people and you race bait the crap out of everybody and encourage everyone to violence. That's how revolutions begin. One side begins to burn everything to the ground while the other experiences the Bubba effect on a massive scale. The Bubba effect is when ordinary people see no other choice but to go out in the street because the government and first responders aren't doing anything. That's the scenario that brought out Kyle Rittenhouse to protect local businesses from being burnt to the ground. When the government refuses to protect the people and uphold law, what other choice do people have? And it's going to get worse before it gets better. The vice president, Kamala Harris, helped violent criminals get bailed out of jail, for crying out loud. If this isn't a bullhorn to anyone looking to burn the system to the ground, I don't know what is. A couple of years ago, I did a special on the communist takeover of Czechoslovakia in the 1950s. We showed you the blueprint that they used. It was smuggled out of the country not long after. It was called "And Not a Shot Was Fired." It was written by a high-ranking member of the Communist Party. It was never meant for Western eyes to see. It describes in detail how to flip a capitalist country to communism. And there is a 5-step plan. See if any of this sounds familiar. First, step 1, you attack the culture. They targeted churches, unions, mass media, universities, political parties, businesses. I think we all know American culture is disintegrating. Religious universities, religion itself, businesses, all of it is under attack. And mass media is leading the charge to burn American justice and culture to the ground. While your family was gathering Thanksgiving, let me show you here what MSNBC's holiday message was. Watch.
Instead of bringing stuffing and biscuits, those settlers brought genocide and violence. That genocide and violence is still on the menu, as state-sponsored violence against Native and Black Americans is commonplace, and violent private white supremacy is celebrated and subsidized.
I mean, I don't know how to fix this and not be balkanized, but that's the plan, for us to be balkanized. There are two Americas. One that believes that crap, that the Pilgrims were violent genocidal monsters. They have nothing to back it up, and we have everything to back up the exact opposite. I mean, that quote is so ridiculous. It's genocide and violence is still on the menu. With who? They even believe that white supremacy is subsidized. Where? How? It is insane. But it's what you're getting now from the public school, brainwashing in the universities, and yes, the media, and even some churches. To kill a country, you must poison their culture. Step 2, attack republic-style democracies. The Marxists called for something called direct democracy. Direct democracy for the communists was considered, quote, an instrument of the socialist revolution. You don't want a republic. You need a direct democracy. Now, keep this in mind over the next two elections, because you're going to hear the words direct democracy both during the coming midterms and the general. It's now mainstream in the Democratic Party. But never forget what communists thought about direct democracy, an instrument of the socialist revolution, end quote. Step 3, seize the guns. The only people in revolutions to have guns are law enforcement and local Marxist militias. Do you remember in Seattle? When they were taking over Seattle, the Marxists had the guns. That was fine for Marxists to have guns, but you can't. Last week, House Republicans warned that Biden, through the ATF, is now working on implementing a backdoor gun registry. That is extraordinarily dangerous. That's what gave Germany to the Nazis. Currently, firearms licenses have to burn purchase records after 20 years. So you go into a gun store, they keep the records. After 20 years, they're supposed to be destroyed. But the ATF has proposed a new rule to stop all of that. It is blatantly unconstitutional. But our government doesn't care anymore. This is only one of the many ways the federal government is trying to keep track of who owns what. The Biden administration wants to spy on your bank accounts if you move at least $10,000 in 1 year, and that's not for a single transaction. You have, let's just say, a $2,000 a month mortgage payment or rent payment. In 5 months, all of your transactions will be spied upon by the federal government. There are so many things about this that are blatantly unconstitutional and not okay. But will this be used as another backdoor gun registry? We have only gotten to step 2, and I'm going to show you exactly how and why the media is the most dangerous player in this entire act. Back in a minute. Right now, I mean, somebody asked me earlier today, was it easier to raise your older kids than it is raising teenagers now? Yes. There is no safe place. Even in your home, it's not safe because of social media and the phones, the iPhones, and all of this stuff. You don't even know if your house is safe. Somebody could steal your home, and you think, how are you going to steal the home? Because they mess with your title. And even when you do a title search or anything like that, it doesn't come back. It doesn't cover this. You'll spend a fortune in legal fees trying to prove you didn't commit bank fraud. Home Title Lock puts a barrier around your home's title, and the instant they detect a cyber thief, to a renter, to a relative trying to forge their way onto your home's title, they help shut it down. If you value your home and your peace of mind, the best thing you can do is get Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. Register your address to see if you're already a victim. Enter the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. Code RADIO at HomeTitleLock.com. All right. I want to make sure that you understand that what I'm showing you is pretty dismal. This chalkboard is really pretty dismal because we're doing 4 out of the 5. And the hardest one is going to be getting rid of all of the guns. That may be our saving grace, because I just don't think Americans are going to put up with it. But who knows? Who knows? Let me go back to the chalkboard and show you steps 4 and 5, because this is where we currently find ourselves and what was on display last week. You have to popularize revolutionary demands of street activists. And then the coordination between the politicians at the top with the ground troops at the bottom. We have those. This is what's happening. Look at steps 4 and 5. Then look at, let's say, this tweet from Kamala Harris. Look at it in context now. Now look at the media again during that same time in that context.
Now, too many see the protests as the problem. No, the problem is what forced your fellow citizens to take to the streets. Persistent and poisonous inequities and injustice. And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
You know that doesn't match anything they're saying about the wrong kind of protests, okay? They're popularizing the ideas, and then they are washing it clean, making sure everybody knows that's not really a bad thing. This is all part of a plan. As I said earlier, revolution is not possible without some kind of infiltration of the justice system. I did a show on this a couple of years ago. The biggest poison in our justice system is George Soros. He has been buying district attorneys all over the country since at least 2015. He has poured millions to try and reshape the justice system. Look, here, let me give you some good news. I've been on George Soros for 15 years. For the first time, I am hearing people that don't vote the same way saying, I think that guy's a problem. You can only cry racism or anti-Semitism so long. People are seeing the fruits of his labor. He can't do these things at the federal level, so he switched gears and went directly to the states. In 2015, he bought DAs in Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Illinois, and New Mexico. All of them had plans to scale back arrest, decriminalization, basically everything we're now hearing from the radicals on the streets. In 2017, Soros pumped $1.45 million to swing the DA election in Philadelphia. It's happening all over, from California to New York. They've been planning at least since 2015. These radical DAs are moving faster than perhaps Soros could have anticipated. Flash mob looting is breaking out in cities where they have begun implementing their revision of the justice system. It is completely out of control in many places, including San Francisco. Why? Well, their new district attorney is the radical Chesa Boudin, whose parents were both convicted felons. Okay, but what did they do? Don't worry, they were just members of the Weather Underground and Black Liberation Army. So it's no surprise now their radical son is decriminalizing criminal activity, and crime is breaking out all over the city. Which brings us full circle to last week in Waukesha. The radical as the DA in San Francisco is, this radical DA actually claims that he was inspired by Waukesha District Attorney John Chisholm. Really? They both spoke together earlier this year on the status of what could only be described as the progressive prosecutor movement. All of these district attorneys are using the exact same playbook: decriminalize crime, impede police from arresting criminals, and make easy for anybody who is a criminal to get out of jail. Well, as we saw last week, this radical agenda has consequences. The person responsible for the Waukesha massacre now has been charged with 6 homicides after ramming his vehicle through their annual Christmas parade. He is a convicted sex offender. He is also recently charged with reckless endangerment and illegal possession of a firearm. But you don't need a gun to kill people. Earlier this month, he allegedly punched his girlfriend and, get this, then tried to run her over with his SUV. Clearly, this man should not have been out on the streets. He should not have been able to do what he tried to do to his girlfriend and what he did do to these poor innocent people at the Christmas parade. But the district attorney, he set his bail ridiculously low, and so he was set free. Now he's got another story, but We can't really figure out what happened at that trial where they were arguing about the bail because it's mysteriously gone or corrupted. This is outrageous, but it is what the left has in store for every city in the country, including yours. These policies have consequences, and the most insane part of this is the radicals know it. Here's an interview from Chisholm in 2007. After facing questions on his radical agenda, he said, and I quote, "Is there going to be an individual I divert or I put into a treatment program who's going to go out and kill somebody? You bet. Guaranteed. It's guaranteed to happen. But it doesn't invalidate the overall approach." How many times have we heard the left say, if it just saves one life? Well, 6 people are now dead. They'd be alive today if it wasn't for the progressive prosecutor movement funded by George Soros. I wonder if that attorney, that prosecuting attorney will now concede that it does invalidate the overall approach. Newt Gingrich has been blackballed by Fox News. Did you know that? Do you remember why? Well, it happened last year after Newt said this.
The number one problem in almost all these cities is George Soros elected left-wing, anti-police, pro-criminal district attorneys who refuse to keep people locked up. Just yesterday, they put somebody back on the street who's wanted for 2 different murders in New York City. You cannot solve this problem, and both Harris and Biden have talked very proudly about what they call progressive district attorneys. Progressive district attorneys are anti-police, pro-criminal, and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
Oh my gosh, what was he saying? He's a crazy man, except everything he said right there is entirely and provably accurate. What's happening with Fox News? It was known at the time that George Soros was buying radical progressive DAs. If you watch me, you knew about it 5 years ago. Anywhere you look in those cities, I can show you a Soros link to their transforming justice system. Wonder if you could do the same thing in Waukesha and John Chisholm. It's got to be hard. Well, let's just look. He currently sits on the data council for a radical group called Measures for Justice. They advocate for all the crazy junk we're seeing in places like San Francisco. Their CEO, Amy Bach, once received a cash prize from George Soros' Open Society Foundation. Oh my gosh. Well, okay, what are the odds? Well, beyond that, the Open Society Foundation is proudly listed as one of Measures for Justice founding supporters. You won't find these connections anywhere at all in the mainstream media, ever. We all used to be able to count on Fox, but they are clearly an entry-level problem when it comes to the media. When it comes to Soros, what are these progressive DAs doing? The support they're getting from all of the people within the federal government, the media is full on set to help them cover up the truth from you and me. This Waukesha tragedy is crucial because it exposes everything from the media to the DAs to Soros, all of it. And it is no surprise the unprecedented misinformation cover-up the mainstream media has launched immediately following. I want you to listen to these reports. This is from CBS.
We are also hearing from the uncle of one of the 18 children hurt in the crash on Sunday. David Begnaud reports on how one 11-year-old girl is doing.
Okay. Well, let me go back and listen to what CBS News, what do they call what happened in Charlottesville? It was, quote, the suspect in the car attack. But this time, when it's caused by a convicted criminal that was improperly let out of jail by a progressive district attorney, It's just a crash. Let's check MSNBC. It was even worse.
Whether it has anything to do with this accident last night and the killing of these people.
So it's an accident. Here's how they handled Charlottesville. Quote, driver in deadly car attack. Here's Politico. A parade crash. Oh my gosh, that sounds like a funny movie. A parade crash? The Associated Press. A parade crash. Wow, it's almost like they're receiving narrative from a single source, Media Matters, and then blasting it out like good little propagandists. It's all too clear the media did actually no real journalism on this whatsoever. No thinking human being could print or speak on the air what they said and actually think it was accurate. So was the attack on purpose? Well, that hasn't been proven in a court of law yet. I am curious, did the media read the actual court documents at all? Listen to count one. Quote, the above named defendant did cause the death of victim A with intent to kill that person. The documents go on describing eyewitness accounts from the officers on site. Multiple times, officers pounded on the windows, shouting, stop. One officer, unbelievably brave, put himself in front of the vehicle, put up his hands and yelled, stop, stop the vehicle. He did this multiple times and the suspect continued to drive ahead. But I want you to listen to this quote. As the vehicle got approximately to Martin Street, it appeared to Officer Buttrin that the vehicle began to increase its speed. As the vehicle was traveling westbound, the vehicle began getting closer to parade spectators and almost struck a young juvenile who was standing in one end of the parking stalls on the north side of the road as its speed was increasing. Does that sound like an accident to you? So why was the suspect increasing his speed as he was plowing into people? Oh, and then there's this. Officers described the suspect driving in a zigzag pattern as he was hitting people. Another witness said it looked like, quote, a direct intent to hit as many parade participants, end quote. Is that what you mean by a parade crash? Where is all of this from the outlets like The Times, The Post, MSNBC, CBS, all the rest? They're all saying the same thing. Where's it coming from? The truth is they can't tell you the truth. They have to push on with the narrative because to do otherwise threatens to expose the entire thing. When things begin to melt down, two things happen. People start turning on each other, and those that remain double down on everything. The media is absolutely out of control over the past 5 years, at least, and much of it was pointed directly at President Trump. I want to show you how they are doubling down on things that we now know absolutely positively did not happen. The media is becoming more dangerous. Back in a minute. Hey, last week, Bank of America made the cheery prediction that stocks are going to fall 20% in the next 12 months. How much have they fallen in the last week? I don't know about you. It makes me glad that I have a hedge built up against market insanity. You've been hearing me for years say the same thing. Please take part of your savings, part of your portfolio, have an IRA or a 401k. Take just a portion of that, maybe 10%, really nothing more than that. Put it into something conservative like precious metals. If you're doing your research, you know something big is coming for the US dollar, and our economy is not doing well, and this isn't going to end well. You need to be smart and early about preserving your wealth. The people who can help you do that, work at Goldline. I want you to call Goldline today and find out how precious metals can protect you from financial disaster. This week only, Goldline has extended their Thanksgiving special due to overwhelming popularity. Call Goldline today. Find out about the special and how you can receive a free 1-ounce silver Santa Claus round for the holidays. They make a great investment and a great gift. Call 866-GOLDLINE. That's 866-GOLDLINE or goldline.com. The media is key to the socialist revolution and the Great Reset. If you lose the media, it's over. The media is becoming more and more unhinged. You remember in 2016, we all had a feeling, but we didn't know for sure. Now, lie after lie after lie is stacking up. It started in 2016. That's when big media was enraptured by the convenient gossip of the Steele dossier. The reason why I'm bringing up the Steele dossier is just to set the record straight. The things that we now know are true. Because The Atlantic is doubling down on the Steele dossier. They're saying the Russia collusion was true. But every document we have now shows the major news outlets chose not to do actual journalism, even though the dossier was chock full of hearsay, unverified sourcing. Many times the media knew it wasn't true, but they went along with it. Big media's malpractice is not surprising at this point, but the FBI's malpractice in this case is disturbing. The Senate Intelligence Committee found that the FBI gave the Steele dossier unjustified credence. Why is that? Well, maybe John Durham's investigation will eventually offer some answers. In the meantime, indictments are slowly trickling out from the Durham investigation. I want to take a stroll down memory lane and look how big media colluded to prop up the sloppy Steele dossier. First, let's review some of the players. We have Hillary Clinton, who in 2016, her firm pays Perkins Coie for campaign services. They then hire Fusion GPS to do opposition research on Donald Trump. 2 months ago, a federal grand jury indicted attorney Mike Sussman. Here's Michael Sussman here, alleging that he falsely claimed to the FBI that he was not advising Hillary Clinton's campaign when he reported the bogus claims of ties between Trump and Russia's Alpha Bank. Wow. So he says, he's working here, says I have no ties to her campaign. Then we have Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele is the former British spy hired by Fusion GPS to do all of the work. He starts digging in March 2016, and he starts digging in, I don't see March 2016, but he starts digging and collecting rumors from supposedly inside sources. But it turns out that his main source was a guy named Igor Danchenko. We introduced you to all of these players a year ago, but it was just our word and the documents. Now it is known and even admitted to by many in the media. Igor Danchenko, he's a former Brookings Institute analyst who claims to have heard from Sergei Milan, who was a real estate broker with Russian ties, about cooperation between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin. So he says he got that information from here, and he passed that information here. Now, special counsel John Durham says phone calls between Danchenko and Milan never happened. Never happened. This guy's not even on the board. It never happened. Danchenko apparently made all of it up and has now been charged with lying to investigators. So here's what we have. 2016, Christopher Steele gives his dossier to the Clinton campaign. He also gives a copy of it to an FBI agent in Rome. September 2016, when an FBI investigation does not materialize, this is when things get crazy. So September 2016, nobody is paying attention to the dossier. There's no investigations going on. Nothing happens. So Christopher Steele meets for off-the-record talks with the New York Times, the Washington Post, Yahoo News, Mother Jones, the New Yorker, and CNN. Then stories start to roll out. On September 23rd, 2016, you have U.S. intel officials probe ties between Trump, advisor, and Kremlin by Michael Isikoff. Michael Isikoff is... He is not to be trusted. So he speaks to Michael Isikoff about Trump's advisor, Carter Page. Christopher Steele then gives a copy of that dossier to then Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid. Harry Reid writes letters to the FBI before the election, pushing for an investigation. The FBI looks at the dossier and says, okay, maybe we'll wiretap Carter Page. October 2016, a veteran spy has given the FBI information alleging a Russian operation to cultivate Donald Trump by David Corn. David Corn is the first to refer to the dossier without naming the British spy Christopher Steele. In the article, anonymous Steele is quoted saying, "There was an established exchange of information between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin of mutual benefit." Anonymous Steele also says he's given the FBI, quote, "several memos, some of which referred to members of Trump's inner circle." So Harry Reid writes a letter to the FBI. It has become clear that you possess explosive information about close ties and coordination between Donald Trump and his top advisors and the Russian government. Turns out that Steele did not know any of the established exchange of information because his main source was Igor Danchenko, who has admitted has made all of it up. Now, at that point, right around the time of the election in 2016, there was no FBI investigation. But by sending the dossier to the FBI, Harry Reid and others were able to say, Trump's being investigated. So then you get down here to November, December of 2016. Trump wins the election. Democrats and the media lose their mind, but they don't reveal the full Steele dossier yet. Then, January 2017, 3 BuzzFeed reporters published this story with the headline, "These reports allege Trump has deep ties to Russia." BuzzFeed publishes the entire dossier, even though the editor, Ben Smith, admits none of this can be verified and has some obvious errors in it. But BuzzFeed went ahead with it, so that Americans can make up their own minds about allegations about the president-elect that have circulated at the highest levels of the U.S. government. Wow, but we can't talk about anything about the vaccine that is happening at the highest levels of the government? We don't get to decide for ourselves, do we? But this case was different. Hillary Clinton operatives made sure the dossier was circulating. Her campaign paid for the dossier. Christopher Steele and lawyers from Perkins Coie gave it to everyone they could. The FBI, Harry Reid, and all of the major media outlets. Then you take to January 2017, the 24th of January. The Wall Street Journal's Mark Maramount writes this story. Key claims in Trump dossier said to come from head of Russian-American business group. Sergei Milan, founder of the Russian-American Chamber of Commerce, is named as the source of, quote, some of the most explosive parts of a dossier containing unverified allegations about President Donald Trump. According to this Wall Street Journal article, Milan, who supposedly claimed a conspiracy of cooperation between Trump and Moscow, relayed the information to a third party who gave it to Christopher Steele, who is still unnamed in the article. But we know that the third party was Igor. Or is it pronounced Igor? Special counsel John Durham says Danchenko never talked to Sergei Milan. Never, not once. Didn't talk to him. Remember, he's off the chalkboard. Danchenko charged with lying repeatedly, claiming he had talked to Milan. The implication is that he made up the conspiracy that he gave to Christopher Steele. Milan has always denied being a source for the Steele dossier. Now, I want to show you something to complete the timeline and tell you about the real-life Orwellian memory hole next. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Especially if you are not worrying about making the payments. Gosh, the price of meat and the price of groceries, all of it is going up, and it's going to continue. May I suggest that if you own your own home, something that happened during the vacation last week that's good news is the Fed actually lowered the rate one more time. So you can now get a mortgage. If you're paying 3%, you may be paying way too much. American Financing is a family-owned lending business that's been helping people like you for over 20 years. Their team of salary-based consultants will walk you through a free mortgage review to see where you could possibly save money with something like a mortgage refi or a consolidation loan. The economy is in the tank right now, and this group of clowns in Washington is not going to turn it around. They are the cause of all of that. Please save money where you can. No tricks, no fees, no obligation. Just call 800-906-2440 or go to AmericanFinancing.net. You have to know the facts so you can share them with your friends because they're doubling down and changing things in real time. On March 29th, 2017, the two Washington Post reporters published a story with this headline: Who is Source D, the man said to be behind the Trump dossier's most salacious claim? Well, that used to be the headline, I should say. Just a few weeks ago, the Washington Post imitated the memory hole from Orwell's 1984 and made changes to the article. Now the headline reads, Sergei Milan, high-level access to Trump or unwitting bystander. They know which one he was. I want to remind you, the original version of this Washington Post article said that Sergei Milan was behind the claim that, quote, Trump had hired prostitutes at the Moscow Ritz-Carlton, and the Kremlin has kept evidence of the encounter. The Post said about Milan, there are also indications that he had contacts with Trump's circle. Reminder, special counsel John Durham says Milan never spoke to Igor Danchenko. The hotel story is completely fabricated. And by the way, you can't make this up. The Washington Post recently explained that they had made 2 corrections to their stories about the Steele dossier. But they put the explainer in the style section of the newspaper and website. That's where stories go to die, and no news story is ever stashed in style. December 2017. On December 31st, 2017, 3 New York Times reporters published how the Russian inquiry began, a campaign, aid, drinks, and talk of political dirt. In this one, the New York Times helps the FBI justify the Trump investigation, saying it wasn't the dossier that caused the FBI to look into it. Instead, it was firsthand information from one of America's closest intelligence allies. George Papadopoulos, Trump foreign policy advisor, told Australia's top diplomat in Britain that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton. This is what triggered the FBI to start investigating on July 2016. And according to the New York Times, Mr. Steele had shown some of his findings to an FBI agent. That information was not part of the justification to start a counterintelligence inquiry, American officials said. But we now know that the Steele dossier was used to justify the wiretap to Carter Page. Naturally, the New York Times won a Pulitzer for that story, and other Trump-Russia stories, all wrong, not giving the Pulitzer back. So what came of all of the media madness over the Steele dossier? Well, George Papadopoulos later pled guilty to one count of making false statements to the FBI, but there's no link that he was working with the Russians at all. The FBI spied on Carter Page for months, never charged with any wrongdoing. Media doesn't care. Paul Manafort went to prison, but his charges were related to tax and bank fraud, not for colluding with Russia with Trump. And I told you that before Trump was ever elected. Big media waited breathlessly for the Mueller report, but that report found no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Last year, a London judge found that Christopher Steele's private intelligence firm had, quote, failed to take reasonable steps to verify information in the dossier. The judge ordered Steele to pay damages to 2 Russian oligarchs that were mentioned in the dossier. Glenn Simpson, Peter Fritsch, and the co-founders of Fusion GPS did not insist on knowing the names of Christopher Steele's sources. Now even the Washington Post admits it was one of the first instances of many instances in which Steele's methods were not significantly challenged. By whom? This is coming from the news organization most famous for challenging absolutely everything surrounding Watergate and Nixon, as they should have. After helping for years to carry water for the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, they published this overdue, lame admission last week while we were having turkey. 5 years later, there are intensifying questions about whether those involved in the dossier saga, from the political operatives who commissioned it to the journalist who amplified parts of it to government officials who used it to obtain a surveillance warrant, assigned too much credibility to the allegations and the man who compiled them. Actually, there is no more question. They totally gave Christopher Steele and his bogus dossier way too much credibility. So did the FBI. Apparently, no one bothered to ask basic questions because they didn't like the answer that it might give. The Washington Post says democracy dies in darkness, but in this case, big media is the darkness. They don't try to shed light on anything anymore because they were in love with the Steele dossier narrative. They're in love with the, oh, inflation is just transitory narrative. This is what they do. The dossier turned out to be a fantasy worth of an Adam Schiff screenplay. And yet, have you heard any apologies from big media, leading Democrats, or even the FBI for their role in fanning the flames of hysterical lies? Yeah, I haven't either. We have so much more to cover. We'll do that tomorrow on the radio program. Thank you so much for listening, and thanks for watching on Blaze TV. From Dallas, good night, America.